The fact of the matter is that the birth rate has been dropping since the 70s. And that's only been because of access to contraception, access to highly effective methods of contraception. And that's only allowed women more access to education, higher education, better opportunities for employment, careers that in the past were shut off to them. And it's just allowed women to be able to exercise full bodily autonomy and self-determination. I do want to say one thing. When there's conversation about decreasing birth rates, in my mind, and this has been this is a long-running trope, is that it's a dog whistle for decreasing birth rates among white families, because this has been something that the far right and anti-choice organizations such as Operation Rescue have used in their arguments to remove access to abortion and remove access to contraception, was that white women were contracepting themselves out of existence, and that white families were contracepting themselves out of existence. There wasn't a concern about Black and brown families, except that if white women are contracepting themselves out of existence, that just means that there's a larger population of Black and brown folks. So, the conversation about decreasing birth rates is very often a dog whistle to encourage, limiting access, and not for all women, except it really does impact all women, but really limiting access to white women in terms of accessing contraception and abortion services. If you want to grow families, you have to create structures and policies that actually support families. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we have, over 10 million children who are living in poverty. There's no point in trying to grow families if we're not taking care of the families that we already have. We have, in the United States, we have the highest Black maternal mortality rate than anywhere. And that's in an industrialized, very resourceful country. And that is, that's a crime that needs to be addressed. If you want to grow the population, you need to actually provide supports for families to be able to prosper and to grow.
When abortion was legalized, births fell a lot, potentially between 5 and 10%. So the question then becomes, well, what would happen if we reversed that policy now, essentially outlawing abortion? Whether it would have that great an effect, I think it's probably likely that the impact that we would have today is less than the impact Roe versus Wade had initially in 1973, or legalizing abortion had in the early 1970s. For instance, we have much better contraception available to us now. Birth control pills were introduced in 1961. That's an excellent form of contraception. It still wasn't all that easy to get for everybody in the early 1970s. Today it's much easier to get. There's, a greater variety of choices. Long-acting reversible contraception, for instance. Another way to think about it is we wouldn't be going from, legal abortion now to a world in which abortion was illegal everywhere in the United States. That's just not what would happen. You can easily imagine, and many states already have on the books, policies that abortion would be legal no matter what. So, let's say half the country had legal abortion and half the country didn't. That certainly would have an impact, but nowhere near as great as the impact would be if it were outlawed everywhere. I'm not advocating for that position. All I'm saying is that what we would likely experience today is probably not as dramatic, which was pretty dramatic at the time, but not as dramatic as what we observed in the early 1970s.